Let's just get into the news. So we're hanging out with Marjorie Taylor Greene. You recently got permanently banned from Twitter.
I did.
It contributed largely to people jumping over to GETTR, which is another Twitter platform. Now, it's a Twitter-like platform, microblogging site.
Right.
Some people have concerns that GETTR is going to have censorship as well because they have similar rules. But aside from you, is also Dr. Robert Malone, a scientist and a dissenting voice in the whole, COVID vaccine debate. Joe Rogan then joins. It becomes this big story. 500,000 people sign up. So I want to get a better understanding of this. Why do you know why you got banned from Twitter?
Well, we'll go with the story. Okay, so here's what happened. I'm an elected member of Congress, which means the people elected me from my district. Over 700,000 people are in my district, and I'm there to represent their voice, their values, and what they want out of their representative in Congress. And Twitter, being a private company, I don't know why they have decided that they can be the judge of information and misinformation, but that's who they have become. I mean, that's what we see on most social media platforms, YouTube also, Facebook, many of them. And over time, over the past years, we've seen conservatives be kicked off, right? This has been a major issue, and it's an extremely important issue for many Americans. So on Twitter, this was my personal account. It's my campaign account. This is what I used to raise money. This is what I used part of my reelection. So it's very important for me. I have 2 Twitter pages. One of them is my congressional page. That's for my congressional office. It's an official site. And then I have this other one that is the one that I just got permanently banned on. So I'm not really sure what happened, but I want to go into it. I had posted on January 1st a really long Twitter thread. It was 20 tweets, I believe. And it was all about, I started it, it's 2022. And I framed it as, let's talk about before COVID and after COVID. And I said, it's like we have a new era that we've moved into. And so each tweet, I went through things saying before COVID, and I would give like what our reality was before COVID. Like, people didn't go to the doctor unless they were sick. I mean, that was what we used to do. As a mom, I've raised kids. I didn't take my kids to the doctor to get a strep test unless they really had symptoms like a fever, sore throat, and things like that. So I was saying before COVID, this is how we lived. And then after COVID, now we get tested all the time for COVID. And so I went through every tweet had that. But involved in each of these tweets, I put information that I had found and researched, like information off of VAERS, which is cdc.gov controls that. That's it's a site where people it's self-reporting. They can report if they've had a vaccine injury, any kind of vaccine, not just COVID, any kind of vaccine, or even a death. Family members or a doctor can report a death from any kind of vaccine. So I had talked about the VAERS system, and which is bothersome to me. There's no investigation into the deaths that have been reported on VAERS. And as a member of Congress, I think it's extremely important. So I had this long tweet thread, but then the next day I tweeted a few more things. I had retweeted someone's tweet from a person that was celebrating and memorializing the terrorist Soleimani that was killed when President Trump was our president. This was a terrible terrorist that had attributed and caused the death of military members and the loss of limbs when they were over there, and it's awful. And this person was just celebrating him and his life and angry at President Trump. That's on Twitter, a lot of it.
Oh, yeah.
And I had retweeted that condemnation of how can this guy be on Twitter? Then I had seen a Fox News interview of one of my Republican colleagues, Dan Crenshaw. And as a member of Congress, we debate policy, right? We should debate policy. I would love to debate policy with all of my colleagues. And he was on an interview, and he was talking about FEMA. And he was saying President Joe Biden wants to do a lot of testing, and he was saying we should use FEMA to set up and do this COVID testing. And then he was also saying we should use FEMA to go into the hospitals to help with the overcrowding. And that was what he was saying we should do. But here's the thing. I completely disagree with him. And I know for a fact that Republicans and conservatives, and I would even argue many Americans would be against the use of FEMA to just continue test for COVID, because we should be more concerned about how to treat COVID. These are just my opinions, not that I'm giving medical advice, but just my opinions. And so I had tweeted at Dan Crenshaw and I had said, no, we don't need to use FEMA to do more COVID testing for sneezes, coughs, and runny noses. And I said, and we don't need to send FEMA into hospitals. We need to rehire the unvaccinated healthcare workers that were fired.
And they are. In some places.
Some places, thank God. Because these people worked on the front lines and they saved people's lives and they have natural immunity. That's my opinion. I think it's great. And they need to be able to continue their careers and support their families.
So that the Dan Crenshaw tweet was the last one you put out, and then they just
I had one more. I had to pick at AOC a little bit because
okay.
she was down in Miami enjoying free Florida and martinis, and I was like, "Ooh, that's a cup full of hypocrisy."
Oh yeah, she's tweeted before that Texas removing the mask mandate was going to cause suffering. I don't want to. I don't have the exact quote. I read it the other day, paraphrasing. She said it was a bad thing, basically. She said that Ron DeSantis could use some tips from the governor of New York.
Wow.
But she's going to Florida,
of course,
partying with no mask on. The thing is, if she really believes in mask mandates, she could choose to wear one.
Well, let me tell you something.
Party,
yeah,
right?
And she doesn't always wear one. And
but not. I don't want to. Right. I don't want to derail.
I mean, I see her at work, so.
But I'm curious. Look, it's 2022. Elections are coming up, and we saw what Twitter did with Hunter Biden's laptop story.
Right.
For those that aren't familiar, a huge breaking story about Hunter Biden, the son of the president, and just malfeasance, I'll put it that way. Mm-hmm. The story gets suppressed on Facebook and Twitter. And there are polls showing that if people had known about the corruption, then a decent amount of people would not have voted for Joe Biden. That gets suppressed. I'm wondering if your suspension is just following. It's some kind of political tactic.
It's political, and here I want to tell you why. So the reason why I bring up Dan Crenshaw, the tweet, is because I told him, you're not conservative, you're hurting our brand, because conservatives don't promote the use of FEMA for testing and unvaccinated healthcare workers being fired. We don't want that. And it was within an hour after that tweet that I got permanently banned from Twitter. Now, here's something interesting. Everybody always talks about politics and money, right? So they were saying that I was being kicked off for COVID misinformation. But, I started wondering, I'm like, why is some people's political speech accepted and promoted on Twitter, whereas other people's political speech is not accepted and, as a matter of fact, is kicked off? And I think that's an issue. So I started looking at who's on the board at Twitter. And most of them are Democrats, and most of them donate to Democrat politicians. But there's also someone that's relatively new to Twitter. His name is Paul Singer, and he's a mega donor for Republicans. And so I had looked into some information on him, and I was like, wow, does he donate to Dan Crenshaw? Turn out he does donate to Dan Crenshaw. As a matter of fact, he donates a lot of money to Dan Crenshaw. I would argue that he helped him get elected by the amount of money that he donated to him. He also donated to a PAC that has benefited Dan Crenshaw. It was money spent on his election. And so I think it was called the American Patriot PAC. It supports a lot of veterans running for Congress. And that PAC had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on his behalf.
I think I do have it here, unless I'm wrong. This is opensecrets.org. It says Singer Paul, New York, $2,700 to Dan Crenshaw.
Right.
And that's just a single contribution. I don't know if
that's usually a max contribution. I think the max contribution's gone up now to $2,900 per candidate. But this is commonplace. So he's a mega donor. But I want you to think about this. This is a guy that came on to Twitter, and it's very interestingly, he was so important. He was able to get Jack Dorsey removed from his own company.
Wow.
That's who Paul Singer is of Elliott Management, and him coming on to Twitter was. He bought a lot of the shares. He became a major shareholder. And then him coming on board, he was able to kick Jack Dorsey out of his own company. I think that's significant. And then this is a guy that donates a lot of money to politicians. And he's not a fan of mine. And he's also not a fan of former President Donald J. Trump.
And he's not giving you any money?
Oh, no.
No.
No, he wouldn't give me money because I don't say and do the types of things he supports.
Interesting.
So I can't prove this. This is just something I'm talking about because I think these are the type of things that do play a role behind the scenes. And I think they're important. I really do. And I'm saying that not only as a member of Congress, I'm saying that as an American also. And I think that when Twitter has overgrown its position, and I really believe it has, because Twitter is controlling political speech, absolutely controlling political speech, not just for American citizens, but for members of Congress. And I would say that's actually an attack. That is actually a political attack against my brand of politics. I know Paul Singer hates President Trump. He was a big fan of Marco Rubio. And that's an open known thing. So I'm not really sure, but I don't think that it was just COVID misinformation.
No, I think it's political. And I think some of it is, it's not just Twitter, it's YouTube as well. There's stuff that we can't talk about on YouTube. YouTube would shut the stream down in 2 seconds.
Of course.
And that's wrong. So we're not having real political discourse in this country when the common spaces that we use, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, etc., are in the control of one political faction.
That's right.
And they just say, well, you broke the rules. It's a private platform. I can do what I want. It's crazy to me because I grew up liberal and we were always complaining about big corporations suppressing the commons and hurting the little guy in the working class.
Yeah.
And
you know what? I feel the same way.
Now I'm watching it happen.
Yes.
And worse, it's affecting politics. Like, you are a sitting member of Congress and your voice, people need to hear it. So they know what you're saying when you were there voting on things. And Twitter's like, no, we don't think that's important.
Well, I'll tell you what, I have a term for it.
I'm sorry, real quick. Yeah. It's not that Twitter is not sitting there saying we don't think it's important. They're saying it is important and we better not let people hear it.
Yes, no, exactly. So I have a term for what you're talking about. I call it corporate communism. And corporate communism is something that I just made up because it made sense to me. It's these large corporations controlling, and usually they're affiliated with the government. So take, for example, you've got a mega donor, a Republican mega donor on Twitter that hates me and likes other types of Republicans that are different than me. And so wouldn't he play a part in getting me kicked off? Let's get rid of her. We got rid of President Trump. They're hurting the type of Republican brand that we want. I think this is really scary. And here's something that's great. Here's what I know about all Americans. When you sit down and talk to each other, we all care about the same thing. We do. Most of us care about, we can find so much in common together by being able to have these discussions on these platforms, then we can really find apart from one another. And that's why I think censorship is so wrong.
Well, I think the biggest problem with it is we've gone through a bunch of different forms of data showing people who are on the left in America, whatever that means, like the general term, only get their news from left-wing sources. And people who are centrist or right-wing get their news from a mixture of sources. Mm-hmm. So when you have people on the left and the only thing they've ever heard about you comes from the New York Times or the Atlantic or something, they think the worst, craziest things imaginable.
Think crazy things.
And if you censor those, if they censor you, well, then how are people actually going to hear what you think?
They can't.
And so there's this view of you, especially if like you pull up your Wikipedia page, that's it's insane.
I want you to know I have kept that there as a badge of honor.
That's awesome.
Because Wikipedia is just, it's whatever anybody types on there. And I think people should know that about Wikipedia. It's not truth. Mm-hmm. I've never tried to change it. It's what other people have gone and written about me. Nothing that I've ever written about myself or even that I've cared to make sure is factual. And I've left it there for a reason because I want to be able to prove to people that, look, Wikipedia is someone else's words. It's just like a fake news article written about me or someone else.
And that's the craziest thing to me is how, well, I've talked to James O'Keefe. Wikipedia, in these articles, it says from Wikipedia. It doesn't say from random users. Like these statements may be an aggregate of different people putting it together. Mm-hmm. Wikipedia puts their name on it. So I think they should be held liable for defamation and libel.
I totally agree with you. I agree with you 100%. And here's the thing about Wikipedia is, let's say that I wanted to fight it. I could have one of my staff go on there every single day and fix it and correct the misinformation. Someone else can go on there and change it again.
Yeah.
So yeah, with Wikipedia putting their name on it, they are the ones liable for the lies and slander, libel and slander about people.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to watch live, you can check out this channel Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, and if you want more unfiltered and uncensored content with all of these guests, go to timcast.com and become a member. All of these guests you know and love in exclusive segments on our website where we are unrestricted in what we talk about, so you'll definitely not want to miss it. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all next time.